There was a phase in my life when I wanted to learn everything. Not metaphorically, literally everything. And, unfortunately, I had already been informed of one fairly serious limitation. There are only 24 hours in a day. Somewhere around 2018 or 2019, I was getting deeper into learning design. I was writing scripts, storyboarding videos, designing learning experiences. Basically, I was the person who would draw a rectangle on a piece of paper and proudly call it a storyboard. But then I'd see what graphic designers were doing with those storyboards. And that was where things became dangerous. Because suddenly, my little boxes on paper were turning into actual worlds. A character could move. A camera could fly through a scene. Something could explode. Something could transform. And I would sit there thinking, I should probably learn how to do that. Then came the other side of the equation. If I wanted my prototypes to actually do things, I needed HTML, JavaScript, logic. Basically, I had discovered that rectangles could have feelings. So my learning list began growing. HTML, JavaScript, graphic design, animation, After Effects, Animate, Photoshop, 3D, Unity, Maya. And somewhere on that mountain, I was still expected to have a job. And the funny thing about learning is that the syllabus doesn't wait for you. Every time I learned one thing, 3 new things appeared. Meanwhile, outside my little learning universe, the world was doing what the world does. Meetings, deadlines, emails, presentations, more meetings about the previous meeting. And eventually I had to confront the mathematics. If I spent 8 hours working, 8 hours sleeping, and a few hours pretending I had a life, the equation wasn't looking particularly encouraging. So I made a compromise. I wouldn't become an expert at everything. I'd understand the foundations, enough to know what good design looked like, enough to understand how things worked, enough to speak the language. Graphic design principles, storytelling, gamification, interaction, technology, the logic behind the tools, but not necessarily every button inside every tool. Because somewhere along the way, I realized something fairly obvious. Knowing what to create and actually knowing how to manufacture every component of it are two very different careers. And that's how the creative world traditionally worked. You had a designer, an animator, a developer, maybe a 3D artist, maybe a video editor, and eventually, you had a meeting. You'd explain your idea. Someone would build it. They'd send it back. You'd test it, send feedback. They'd rebuild it. And somewhere around version 17, you finally remembered what you originally wanted. I wasn't frustrated with the people doing the work. Quite the opposite. I was frustrated that the distance between an idea in my head and something I could actually see was so enormous. So I kept learning, not because I thought I could master everything, but because I wanted to shorten that distance. And then, time did what time does. It passed. Cut to 2024. Suddenly, the rules had changed. AI tools started appearing everywhere. And suddenly, the thing I had spent years thinking about could sometimes be described in a sentence. It felt slightly like having a magic lamp, except instead of 3 wishes, you got a text box. Make me an animation. And something moved. Build me an interaction. Something worked. Give me a visual. There it was. And suddenly, all those things I'd learned, without ever becoming an expert at them, became useful again. The irony was, I hadn't wasted all those years by not becoming a master of every tool. I'd been collecting the vocabulary, And AI changed my role. I didn't necessarily have to be the person operating every machine. I could become the person deciding what the machine should make. And that's what I find fascinating. The distance between imagination and execution suddenly became much smaller. Earlier, I might have needed someone to animate an idea, someone else to code it, someone else to assemble it. Now I can sometimes go from, I have an idea, to, here, look. And honestly, I'm having a ridiculous amount of fun with it. But then I noticed something. The technology had made execution easier. It hadn't made creativity easier. Because if everyone suddenly has access to 1,000 tools, the tools themselves stop being the advantage. Then what becomes the advantage? Knowing which one to use, knowing when to use it, knowing what to combine, and, perhaps most importantly, knowing what is actually worth making. Because now you can combine tools. One model for images, another for video, another for sound, another for code, another for editing. And suddenly, creativity starts looking suspiciously like permutation and combination. But having more crayons doesn't automatically make someone a better artist. And having more AI tools doesn't automatically make someone more creative. What seems to matter is everything you bring before the prompt. Your experience, your references, your taste, your ability to notice what works and what absolutely does not. AI can give you 10 possibilities. Your job is to recognize the 11th. So perhaps the bottleneck has simply moved. Earlier, the bottleneck was, can I build this? Now it increasingly feels like, can I imagine something worth building? And strangely, I think that's a much more interesting problem to have. Which brings me to my completely scientific, entirely objective, definitely not self-invented, AI timeline. Around 2018 and 2019, I was somewhere behind the curve, looking at designers, looking at developers, looking at animators, thinking, right, I should probably learn that too. Then the curve started moving, and moving faster, and faster. And at some point, I stopped trying to catch every tool. Because perhaps the future isn't about knowing every tool. Perhaps it's about knowing enough to imagine what they can do together. Of course, I could be completely wrong. This is AI we're talking about. By the time this video is published, this entire argument may already be obsolete, which, honestly, would be very on-brand for me. I spent years trying to predict technology, only to discover that technology doesn't particularly care about my predictions. And just to be clear, none of this is meant to diminish the people who actually mastered these disciplines. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Designers, developers, animators, and storytellers were the reason I wanted to learn any of this in the first place. They showed me what was possible, long before I had the ability to make it myself. And perhaps that's what makes this moment interesting. We're not simply watching machines become more capable. We're watching humans figure out what to do with that capability. I don't know when AI will become as creative as we are. I don't know if there will even be a clear line between the two. And frankly, I don't think anyone knows. But until then, I'm rather enjoying the journey. Because maybe the most interesting thing about AI isn't that it can make things for us. Maybe it's that it gives more of us the chance to make the things we've been carrying around in our heads for years. And if that's where we are heading, I'm curious to see what we create next.